Hello, welcome to Free Will, Science, and Religion. I'm Chandler Klebs, and I'm here with George Ortega, Jamie Soden, and our newest person, Logan Meyer. And we're going to be talking about free will and the self. We're going to talk about people and what the self is, people's sense of self, and how their belief of free will may play into all this. So I believe it was Logan who suggested this topic. Logan, what did you have in mind?
Well, no, I mean, with the whole, we were about to go into intelligence, and it's like, how can we really talk about something like that? Like, what causes us to do what we do unless we talk about the self? Like, what is the self? Because, I mean, like, when I look at the dictionary, like, I just pulled up on Google right now, and it says the self is a person's essential being that distinguishes them from others, especially considered as the object of introspection or reflexive action. But then again, like I was telling George about how like I read something from Nietzsche and it was, there are no actors, there's just actions, and it makes
Yeah, Logan, you there? All right, we lost Logan again. That's right.
That's weird. I hope he comes back. But yeah, I'd like to say about the self is that it really depends on what someone is meaning when they talk about the self. As with all words, things have to be clearly defined. Because it seems that some definitions of self mean that there is no self in any sense of those terms, and then other definitions of self would make everything a self.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think Logan's definition from Google that I think he said something about like involving introspection and what was the other word he used?
reflexive action.
Oh, thanks. Oh, you're back. Okay, so yes. Now here's the thing. To the extent that we do that, we're not actually doing that because we don't have a free will. So even that definition of self is kind of like buying into this illusion of free will.
Yeah, it's another way of saying it is that, well, we're doing it, but we had no choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it gets really confusing because someone will ask the question of, well, who did this thing? Li- like I guess let's see if we think of an example of, well, who baked this loaf of bread? And then, well, then we identify some person, some baker, somebody who baked the bread. We it's like identifying a person is a practical thing because if you want more of that bread the way that was, you go to that person.
Right, and that makes sense. So so I think, the self, so I think Buddhism and some other thought systems would say that we don't have like a quote unquote personal self or an enduring self. In other words, yes, if we define self as we're a person and we're not someone else, that, our self is different from the self of someone else, but neither selves are enduring. And I would say neither of the selves are personal because one can't separate, for example, where does our personhood end? We're connected to our environment. We're connected to other people, to what we hear, to what we see and all. So, I mean, maybe it would end where our senses end. I guess I'm asking more of a question than making an assertion in that way.
Hmm. What do you mean by that though? Like if it ends at our senses, what do you mean by that?
Well, for example, um, we have hearing. So our self would end at the hearing apparatus and it wouldn't extend to what we hear.
Hmm.
Even though what we hear is just like what we see, what we feel, and all that stuff is, just kind of like just causes us to be who we are in a sense, or at least to do what we do, or just like to perceive, to be aware. Like we wouldn't have an awareness without the external environment, but the external environment isn't really who we are.
Yeah, it's a little bit interesting because like some people say that, well, what we are is basically consciousness. Like, we're conscious, like we're aware of things going on. May not be the choosers of what's going on, but we usually think of some person, or any animal really, as being aware, and that's what almost one of the essential things that makes life important, it seems like. And so if something isn't conscious, it's almost like it's dead.
That kind of gets into like what's the definition of consciousness and what qualifies as being conscious at that point. Because as far as we are aware, no pun intended, um, we are the only animals that are self-aware. But I'm under the impression that it's possible that other animals are. We're just not, aware of it yet.
Well, yeah, see, this is a very interesting topic. We have talked about awareness, slash consciousness, before many times. And yeah, actually, I would kind of like to ask you what you mean about, as far as we're aware, we're the only animals that are self-conscious. And what do you mean, like self-conscious, since we're talking about the self?
um, what I mean by that is, this is where it gets a little slippery because you can almost attribute this to everything, but it's like because like for me, I am Logan Meyer. That's how I identify. I don't know, or at least I'm not aware that other animals attribute names or titles to themselves like we do. And in that sense, like, because I'm aware of my existence, I'm aware that there are other objects that I'm perceiving to be other minds, and I know that I'm aware of that. Uh,
Oh,
crap.
so is this like the problem of other minds?
Yeah, it kind of gets into that a little bit too. I don't know. I don't want to dive into solipsism too hard, but
Oh, I know, but this is a lot of fun. It's like Rene Descartes all over again. I think
yeah.
I think therefore I am. Like the only thing you can be sure of is your own awareness.
And
Yeah.
actually, this relates to, in terms of like the self. Like, let's say we don't have a self, or like, it's not a free self. Then like, this relates to how we define what's causing us to do what we do. For example, like if we're only aware of our own awareness, we're not aware of the awareness of others. I mean, I guess we can kind of like, we can infer that other people have awareness or consciousness because other people have the same biology that we do. But it also leads to a question of like, if our awareness isn't ours because we don't have a free will, you know is what's making is it proper to define what is making us aware, or is what is making us do what we do, think what we think, and all, is it proper to describe that as being aware or conscious?
Mm.
This kind of reminds me about how, in one of our earliest episodes, David Joseph asked the question, "When do we become conscious?" And somehow that turned into a conversation that that where, with like this one guy getting angry who later left. It was kind of strange, about consciousness. But yeah, basically we have to consider, like, the matter that is us before it became what we now identify as us. Was it conscious, or does something start to become conscious? And then we get into, like, I forgot what the word for this is, where everything is conscious. Panpsychism or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Chandler, you make a good point because, like, David was saying, yes, like we're zygotes, and like at a certain, or we're a single, like, cell at one point, and at what point during our development in the uterus, as an embryo or whatever comes before that, at what point do we become aware, and what's the nature of that?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most interesting subjects ever, because you have to consider that, okay, Now, George, you'll enjoy this because considering that humans don't create the human brain, we don't create the brain. So, what consciousness, if any, is involved in the actual building of the brain, which is what so many people say is a requirement for consciousness?
Well, that's my point with the panpsychism, and because my personal belief is that the universe is conscious, that everything is consciousness, because like and I the way I reach that is like that we define ourselves as intelligent. We human beings, because we build computers, we fly to the moon and back. We do intelligent things, but if this intelligent isn't ours because we're just puppets, it would seem we would have to like attribute this intelligence to whatever is making us do this stuff. And then like if we reach that point that whatever's making us do, what we do is intelligent, then would it seem that like whatever is intelligent has to be conscious. I can't see something being intelligent without being conscious. Although as I'm saying that, some of us have brought up the point that, well, computers are intelligent and they're not conscious. So it gets complicated, but it would seem that like if our intelligence isn't ours, what is making us do stuff is both intelligent and conscious. I don't know.
Hmm. I kind of admit that's kind of interesting point about like all things being conscious though. Like, I was under the impression like I don't know how to define consciousness in that context with everything being conscious, but that consciousness is possibly an ever evolving process. Like where we are now, obviously, is not where animals were, millions of years ago.
Yeah, and another thing is like, for example, with evolution. Okay, you have, let's say, an organism that just had feet, right? And arms, and hands, whatever, I don't know. And then all of a sudden, or through what? It might take 50 million years. I don't know how long it took to do that, but like in the course of 50 million years, all of a sudden this organism, animal, whatever, goes from having feet to having wings. Now, I can't see that as being random in the sense of not kind of like planned, not designed, not ordered. But when I talk like this, a lot of people will equate that with like um, intelligent design and like, divine kind of things and all. But I just can't see how we can get around that something is kind of like intending, let's say, the organism to evolve the wings. And again, this is like 15 million years out. How is like, how would something would have to know that if it started like 50 million years before, that eventually it would come up with wings. I mean, like, I don't know. What do you guys think about that? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I would like to say that in a sense, like, I understand what George is saying here because, like, he's not necessarily making the case like, a creationist or intelligent design person. He's not necessarily doing that because they're trying to use that as just a stepping stone to convert everyone to Christianity, and he's not doing that. But the point is, that's the way he sees it. I think that's a very honest way to look at it, is to see things. I mean, when it looks like something was planned or designed, I think that it's totally okay to say that. But I'll see because I'm sure we all have different opinions on that. What do you think, Logan?
I mean, the way you were describing it, George, really did sound like an intelligent design argument. Like it was argument for like some sort of creation or whatever. So that's how when I was listening, I was sitting there going, I was kind of like biting my teeth a little bit or whatever because I was like, yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about the way those words are used. I don't know. I feel like words like creation and design or things that imply intelligence kind of it's kind of loaded.
Right. All right. So let's say we accept that. But then the question becomes, how do we explain what, like, so like if we don't use intelligence or planning, how do we explain, for example, even what we're doing? How do we explain like the laws of nature and all that? What, what kind of words? You know, again, how do we explain why what happens happens?
Hmm.
It's kind of interesting because we live in a, humans like us, we live in a world full of intention, where we do plan things in advance and we have a general idea when we're writing a book or we're building something, we have a general idea of what it is we're trying to do. And then we work on it piece by piece until it's complete. And so it's interesting. That's the way we operate. And I mean, it doesn't seem too far fetched to even think of small matter being, I don't know, perhaps conscious collaborators to build things.
Um, do we like some? We've had this discussion before, and some of us have, asserted, well, that things just are. That in other words, like evolution just happens. But is that I mean, couldn't we just like say that about ourselves? Like that. We just do what we do. I mean, in other words, isn't that a way of kind of like just evading the exploration of what causes what happens to happen to happen?
Yeah, that's exactly what that sounds like, which is why I've uh more like when people ask me questions and I don't know an answer, I'm more inclined to say I don't know than to say, well, it just is. And I used to say that a lot. I would just say it just is. It is what it is. It is what it is. And now I'm more like I don't know. I don't know what does that. But we could explore that. And I think yeah, that's a good point you make there. I like that. I like that.
I think it's good for us to actually admit we don't know and possibly investigate certain questions, because I feel like people have heavily, like, say, misunderstood evolution, but certain words like random mutations and stuff just happening, unconsciously. Like, I feel like it's almost a cop out of trying to find the real reason. That seems that way.
Yeah, again, it's like it's a difficult problem. It's how do we explain and for example, like with intelligence and with consciousness, another explanation that we've heard on earlier podcasts is that, well, we human beings have the biological apparatus for, let's say, intelligence, but like the universe wouldn't. But then in response to that, I've asked the question, well, wait a minute. How do we determine what's intelligence or not? Do we determine it based on our understanding of the mechanism and of the apparatus? Or do we determine what's intelligent based on the manifestation? Like something's intelligent because, like a computer, it's a complex, it's like it expresses intelligence. And if it's the second option, then wouldn't we have to like conclude that the human brain, for example, is the most complex structure we're aware of in the universe? Wouldn't what created that, by this definition, have to be defined as intelligent?
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, we have an interesting case of the fact that, like a brain, as well as, the whole nerve system, the whole body of any animal or even plant is so complex and working together so well most of the time, and yet we don't build those things. Something smaller than us does. Like, the immune system is a good example about how, like, the cells of the body will notice there's some foreign object that doesn't belong and try to eliminate it.
Hmm.
So it seems like it requires a certain consciousness of something there.
No, but there was a point brought up about the comparison between a computer and the human brain because it seems like the brain is what's required to be conscious, and then there's also the topic of intelligence we're talking about here. If intelligence isn't necessarily required for consciousness, what besides the brain, what is it that makes us conscious versus computers then?
And yeah, that's an interesting question, Logan, because I've thought about this and I've actually wondered, well, we're just made of matter. We're just made of all sorts of different elements, and so are computers. I mean, it's not too far-fetched to think of like a computer that's conscious. So sometimes it's hard to say. It's really hard to say that our computers aren't conscious.
I think, like in earlier times, we kind of like attributed even intelligence. I think, a long time ago, we attributed intelligence just to human beings. Then we had to include other animals. I think now we might even include like single cells or whatever. But we may have to extend this definition of intelligence beyond that to include computers. For example, like if we address consciousness as awareness, right? Well, isn't a computer actually more aware than a human being? Because, like, for example, if we were to ask, like, within a millisecond, to find, let's say, 100 facts or 1,000 facts or 1,000,000 facts within our memory banks, we couldn't do that. We're not aware of that, but a computer is aware of all this vast memory store. So we may have to actually expand this definition of consciousness or awareness to include inanimate matter.
Yeah, and it gets into this thing about what is the difference between artificial intelligence and so-called real intelligence? Like, where's the distinction?
My mind's still a little blown by what you said there, George. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like,
All right, Logan, let me say it again. Yeah. So basically, we, if consciousness is awareness, right? And like, for example, we are aware of, or we become aware of what's in our memory. Right now, I'm saying a sentence with words that were in my memory, and so I'm obviously aware of them. But a computer is aware of a lot more data than our human brain. So we, by that understanding, have to like suggest that a computer, is not just aware or conscious, is much more conscious than we human beings.
yeah, I guess so. I mean, if that's how you're defining conscious, I guess, yeah, we would have to say that computers are conscious, at least to some extent. Huh.
Yeah, and like a few examples I would provide of this is first of all considering the computers almost always beat humans at chess. That's a fine example. Another example is the artificial intelligence of some like enemies, some monsters in video games like Minecraft is they chase after the player in all sorts of ways. No matter where the player is, the skeletons know how to shoot those arrows right at you. It's like they seriously, just like it's like because these computers are programmed to do the
Or
right
artificial
thing.
intelligence.
What?
Artificial intelligence.
Yeah, exactly. Artificial intelligence often surpasses real intelligence, as we call it. Like human intelligence isn't as good as artificial intelligence.
It's not. It's crazy. Oh my
It's
gosh.
incredible because it's, for one thing, artificial intelligence doesn't make mistakes the same way we do.
That's very true. I mean, I was just thinking, like, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the game Alien Isolation. It's featured from the movie Alien. And basically, what happens is, like, depending on the difficulty you play on, um, you basically are on this ship and you're trying to find a way back onto the original ship because you kind of got stranded on it. And you're going through, and this alien eventually appears and is basically chasing you around, and it actually adapts to how you play. That's an incredibly smart AI. Like, it learns how you do things, and like you get a flamethrower in the game, and you use a flamethrower on it, and the more you use it, the more you have to use it to be able to get it to run away from you again. And it's like that's an incredibly smart AI, and the fact that we can do that is, I don't know, it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's just it. When you have computer programs that actually learn based on experience and change their behavior, it gets dangerously close to what all animals have been capable of for the longest time.
Oh, that's crazy to think about. Oh my gosh.
And another thing to consider is like, okay, I like to observe ants because there's a lot of them around the house. Like, okay, so let's say that an ant is walking in a direction, and then you put your finger or your whole hand in its path. It will walk around it. It sees it and it walks around it or some other direction.
Hmm.
And sometimes it speeds up trying to run away because it's scared.
Yeah.
And so we got to consider how small an ant is, and yet it can do that. No matter how big or small an animal is, it can do that. And so we got to consider that consciousness and intelligence doesn't seem to depend too much on size.
Hmm.
Yeah, and also like, I don't know if we understand, for example, salmon, they'll be born in some brook or something, in some lake, whatever, and then they'll go out into the ocean, and I don't know how long after that they will find their way back to the exact spawning ground. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happens in nature, that's beyond even the genetic stuff. I mean, think of something as simple as like a bird who has never seen another bird build a nest is able to build a nest. So how does that how is that how is that ability stored in physical genes? To
Oh
build a
man,
nest,
you're right,
huh?
George. How in the world? Like, how does that happen? Like the best I can come up with as far as the salmon goes is that they have some kind of built-in GPS that tells them their exact position when they first hatch. And for some reason, they know how to get back there, like they've got a map or GPS or something. It's like, which would be incredible. But like the bird in the nest, it's like, yeah. Oh, and here's another thing. This might sound a little weird, guys, but there's something I've always wondered. How in the world did people figure out how to have sex? Like, I just wondered this. Like, how in the world do people figure this out? Because I'm thinking like a long time ago, like billions of years ago. Because like I think like the earliest organisms, they were all asexual reproduction, just cloning and stuff. But then some plants and some animals like even started having genders, and like certain plants have to be pollinated by bees and weird stuff like that. You have to like this is examples of strange stuff. Like, how in the world does this work?
Yeah, and so that, that's in a certain sense why I'm kind of like a pantheist. In other words, like there seems to be an intelligence out there that's just so much more vast than ours. And again, I'm definitely not defending the Garden of Eden and talking serpents and so much is in the Bible, but just limiting it to this non-religious understanding of something that put together the laws of nature, so that they work, because again, like if we don't go to that kind of explanation, then we're left saying, well, things just are the way they are.
And here's another thought, George. Now this is a far-fetched thing because I mean a lot of the stuff we're saying, there's no way we could prove this, but it's a very fun idea. And here's an idea I'd like to present. Suppose that even after we so-called die as humans or other animals die, that matter that was them, let's say that somehow it retains knowledge that is somehow still it existing somehow and still is preserved, like you have a universe that is learning over time based on the experiences of all the living creatures, and over time basically becomes a self-learning chess program. In a sense, it becomes a learning thing and becomes more knowledgeable, acts more intelligently over time.
Man, it makes the universe sound like just one giant machine. It really does.
Oh, it certainly does. And you know what's interesting about it? Such a view is actually much more grand, it's more interesting than any view that I've ever heard promoted by any religion.
Yeah,
I mean,
this
it makes me think of like the simulation theory, though, like how everything is just like mechanical and stuff. And it's like it could just be one giant, as we, because of our perceptions, of course, a simulation based because of, I know this is ad hoc, but just like the alien that has a universe and you got a C on it or something. But I don't know. It makes me think of that. I don't when you talk about like almost like an intelligence or whatever, and
Yeah,
I don't know.
this could be like we could all be part of some giant organism's dream or something, or or consciousness. Yeah,
Hey, I know it's the windfish. You guys know about the windfish?
guys, listen, I have to get going, but like you continue with this, and like Logan, hopefully we'll see you on other podcasts. If you want to become a host, just absolutely. All right, so talk to you guys later, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, bye bye.
Yeah. We've been talking for about half an hour, but I would like to tell you guys about the windfish since we were talking about something being a thing's dream or something.
Mhm.
It was The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening for Game Boy years ago, and of course there's remakes of it too, where the entire game, all that happened was all a dream by this huge whale-like creature, the windfish. It's a flying whale. So it's funny, but here's the deal. When the fish finally wakes up, the island disappears. And it's like the whole thing was all an illusion. Just like the Matrix or something. Like the whole thing was an illusion. It was all just a dream. It wasn't even real. And yet it felt real.
Yeah, that kind of brings into like with us. I mean, we think we're experiencing this. I mean, I think I'm experiencing this, but oh my gosh, like I'm just a part of some, and I could be part of some animal's dream, and they're waking up, and then poof, I'm gone.
Yeah, like for example, like all of us, we've probably had dreams when we've been sleeping at night, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, like you have a dream and it seems real. It seems so real. Like you'll be talking to people in the dream, or you'll be flying around, or swimming, or you'll be doing something in this dream. You'll be hearing things, and of course, most of the time it'll be some kind of mix of what was actually happening the day before, different events, and your brain's like processing them all. But the dreams, which we say are not real, they're just a dream, but they sure feel as real at the time as what we call reality. So we have to admit, how do we know what we're experiencing right now isn't just a dream, and someday we'll all wake up to another reality, which may also be a dream, and then we'll wake up from that.
Oh my gosh. But your question, though, I mean, it's something I don't even think we can know. I mean, I don't know. Exactly. I just don't know. It's like, how in the world could we know?
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because like I'm sort of I think of myself kind of like a philosopher, and I just mean by that I ask the big freaky questions that will
Chandler, can you bring WSD into the call, please?
I guess we could but did you guys want to still continue a little long with this podcast?
Yep.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, okay, we'll see if we can add WSD or not. Let's see. It doesn't look like he's online.
You and the windfish, man.
Yeah, the windfish. Yeah. It doesn't show him as being online, so I don't know. Yeah. Well, but yeah, but that's just it. Like I like to ask these big questions that will just freak us out. And we got to admit, like you said, Logan, I mean, we're never like we can't know the answer to some of these things. There's just no way to test it, you know? And because of that, like okay, for example, Logan, you're probably familiar how a lot of religious people act like they already have all the answers and there's nothing new to learn.
Yeah.
And then you've got scientists who think, oh, science will one day explain everything. We'll know everything about how the universe works. And I'm like, there's a lot we don't know, and there's a lot we will never know. But there are some things we can know for sure, like free will being an illusion.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting is that a lot of people they're so committed to skepticism, so they become so admitted to like being agnostic about everything, where I think that the free will being an illusion is one of the few things we can ever be confident about, because however things actually work, we know we're not the author or chooser of it. So, you know.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I mean, oh gosh, I mean, I keep thinking of how we could almost reduce it back though. Like, oh, how could I truly trust my senses and reasoning? How do I know that how do I know they've been reliable in the past? Yada yada yada. Going back to solipsism. Oh my gosh, it's like ridiculous.
Oh yeah, and yeah, I think solipsism I sort of get how people get into solipsism, like, well, how do you know anything apart from your own consciousness? And how do you, but then even further, how do you know that what you're conscious of is even the real thing, or if it's all the dream of the windfish?
Yeah, yeah. I've asked that question before. I have.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, it's pretty insane because the more questions we ask, the more we try to answer them, we just end up with more questions that are go unanswered. But I mean, it sure gives us some entertaining stuff to talk about.
Yeah, it does. But it kind of goes back to the thing I said. I think earlier it was about the infinite regress. It seems like there's an infinite regress to pretty much everything.
Oh yeah. Well, here's the deal, guys. Is I'm really supposed to be in bed by 8, and it's 7:43, and I haven't taken my shower, so I probably need to end this podcast anyway soon. And of course, George already left. But it's been great. And Logan, did you have fun?
I did. This is cool.
Oh yeah. We're talking about interesting stuff. So yeah, we usually we do this on weekends and stuff. So I guess I'll end this one. You've been listening to Free Will, Science, and Religion, and we started out talking about what the self is, and then we got into consciousness, and then we got into all sorts of crazy stuff about panpsychism and pantheism, and how do we know that we're not living in a matrix or the dream of the windfish, and funny stuff. And we just came to the conclusion we don't know anything. Hardly, except that free will's an illusion. So I thought it was pretty fun. It sounds like the other guys had fun too. We'll be back with more episodes in the future. So thank you for listening, and goodbye.